Arirang News. It's good to have you with us. I'm Kwon Jang-ho. US President Donald Trump has revealed that he exchanged digits with North Korean leader Kim Jongun last week when they met for their historic summit in Singapore. The White House has suggested that the two will look to talk more often as they proceed to carry out the declaration they signed. To that end, further working-level talks are expected this week as well, with US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo likely to be involved. Can they make enough progress to quell the criticisms that call the declaration toothless? And what does progress need to look like? We'll discuss those issues with an expert a bit later, but first let's head over to our news centre with Devin Whiting to get the latest news updates. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. South and North Korea have been holding discussions since this morning at the border about cooperation in sports. There are a lot of meetings going on between the two sides this month, including last week's first talks between military generals from South and North in over a decade. Our Park Hee-jun has more on today's talks. She's been following the preparations for them all day. Hee-jun, what can you tell us?
Devin, today's discussions are largely focused on inter-Korean sports cooperation and exchanges. The talks began this morning at around 10 a.m. this morning at the Peace House, which is the South Korean building of the Jewish village of Panmunjom. The key agendas for today's talks include joint participation by the two Koreas for the 2018 Asian Games and holding inter-Korean basketball matches. South Korea initially suggested forming joint teams for canoeing and rowing at the Asian Games set to take place in Indonesia in August, but North Korea is known to want to do that in more events, so the two sides could be talking about how many and which ones. Also on the table is whether they will march under the Korean unification flag like they did during the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. And it's a widely known fact that North Korean leader Kim Jongun is a huge basketball fan. In a summit with South Korean President Moon Jae In, Kim proposed holding inter-Korean basketball matches, so that should be on the table as well. The talks are part of ongoing efforts by the two Koreas to implement the Panmunjom Declaration from the April 27th Inter-Korean Summit. And because the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics is widely viewed as the impetus that led to the recent peace talks, the two Koreas will be keen to carry on the momentum of sports cooperation to strengthen their relations. Here's what the head of the South Korean delegation had to say before he left for the border.
As we saw from the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, sports have played a crucial role in bringing North Korea back to inter-Korean dialogue. We'll try our best to make sports an important driving force in future inter-Korean relations and to implement the Panmunjom Declaration.
We're still waiting to hear about the outcomes of the inter-Korean sports talks, but we're expecting a briefing to happen within an hour or two, so I'll make sure to bring you updates on that later. Back to you, Devin.
All right, Park Hee-jun reporting from the Office for Inter-Korean Dialogue. Thank you for that. Now, South Korean President Moon Jae In held a meeting with his top aides today, and quite unusually, it was streamed live for all Blue House staff. President Moon was first and foremost congratulating them on the major victory the ruling party won in last week's local elections and encouraging them to keep up the good work. However, he stressed that the victory also means the Blue House has to work hard to meet the people's high expectations and not disappoint them. President Moon said all Cheongwade staff, whatever their rank, represent the president himself, and he insisted they be competent, that they cultivate a strong moral character, and that they be humble in their service to the people. Now, South Korea's military has begun its twice-a-year maritime exercises. The 2 days of drills are aimed at better protecting the country's easternmost islets of Dokdo. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Park Ji-won has more.
South Korea's Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, and Coast Guard began their regular two-day maritime drills on Monday on the nation's easternmost island of Dokdo and the surrounding East Sea. South Korea's Navy says the maritime exercises are held in conjunction with field training exercises by the Navy's First Fleet. 6 warships, including a 3,200-ton destroyer, as well as 7 aircraft, including Navy P-3 maritime patrol aircraft, Lynx helicopters, and Air Force F-15K fighter jets are participating in the drills. According to South Korea's Defense Ministry Monday morning, the Dokdo Defense Exercise is a regular Navy exercise aiming at preventing external forces' infiltration into the South Korean territory of Dokdo. The Dokdo exercises date back to 1986 and have been held twice a year since 2003. The drills last took place in December last year. South Korea's Navy official told Arirang News Monday that these drills are similar in size and level to previous years. Meanwhile, Japan's media outlets reported that Tokyo's foreign ministry protested to Seoul through a diplomatic channel, saying the maritime exercise is unacceptable considering the Japanese government's stance over Dokdo. Japan has been intensifying its wrongful territorial claims over South Korea's easternmost island of Dokdo, which has belonged to South Korea historically for thousands of years and is under the legal and effective control of the South Korean government. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Today marks 1 year in office for South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyungwha, and on the occasion she held a press briefing and fielded questions from reporters mostly about the North Korea-U.S. summit and other developments related to the North. She said she spoke with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo this morning, and they exchanged details about Pompeo's visit to China and the first meeting between generals from the two Koreas in over a decade. She said Pompeo is determined to carry out the follow-up measures in America's agreement with the North speedily. Kang was asked how South Korea sees U.S. President Trump's comments about Seoul and Tokyo paying for Pyongyang's denuclearization. She said it is understood that all stakeholders will contribute in various ways. Minister Kang also mentioned that by the end of this month, her ministry will announce its plans to bring to the world's attention Japan's sexual enslavement of women across Asia during the Second World War as a grave human rights issue. With growing anticipation for better ties with North Korea, South Korea has laid out its vision for economic cooperation, and it involves working with other countries in the region, especially on infrastructure projects. Oh Soo-young explains.
Seoul plans to lay the groundwork for economic cooperation with North Korea by partnering with regional neighbors, including Russia. On Monday, the Presidential Committee on Northern Economic Cooperation announced 4 major goals and 14 specific targets to achieve the Moon Jae In government's so-called New Northern Policy. The initiative aims to eventually connect South and North Korea to the wider Far East region through joint projects in economic cooperation, energy, transport and other sectors. Such efforts in the past had stalled, as the government's plans depended heavily on North Korea's participation. According to the Presidential Committee, that is why Seoul hopes to soon launch projects with Russia to pave the way for cooperation with the North once it's ready to come on board. The most notable sectors include connecting railroads, power grids and gas pipelines, which would stretch from the Korean peninsula to Russia's Far East. But some of the most immediate sectors include ICT, healthcare and tourism, especially as Russian energy firms face a number of US and EU sanctions.
We plan to build an innovation platform to support efforts for research and development, as well as commercialization for small and medium-sized businesses that integrate Russia's core technology and our production technology.
Seoul also plans to support Central Asian countries with agricultural and financial technology.
As inter-Korean relations improve and the North takes steps to denuclearize, which could lead to the easing of international sanctions, hopes are high that Pyongyang will soon play an active role in regional efforts to build the peace and economic prosperity of Northeast Asia and Eurasia. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
Following the landmark summit between the leaders of North Korea and the US in Singapore, a question that has now been raised is, when will they talk again? President Trump told reporters last Friday that he had exchanged direct phone numbers with Kim Jongun during their face-to-face last week. More details of that exchange has been revealed, which our Kim Yo-sun reports.
On the morning of the first-ever summit between North Korea and the U.S., President Trump reportedly gave his direct phone number to Kim Jongun. According to an unnamed U.S. government official, President Trump called White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Kim Yo-jung, the North Korean leader's younger sister and a senior member of the North's regime, into the room while he had his one-on-one talk with Kim Jong-un. It was at this point that the two reportedly exchanged phone numbers. Also during the extended talks, which were attended by the two leaders' close aides, Trump revealed that he had exchanged numbers with Kim while telling him to call often. The official also said Kim Jong-un stated that the world should respect President Trump explaining, quote, that it was him who got rid of the nuclear button on my desk. It remains to be seen whether the two leaders will talk over the phone soon, especially as Trump hinted last week that he'd call Kim Jong-un on Sunday, U.S. local time. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, to discuss these latest developments, we have joining us in the studio Dr. Woo Jung-yup, a research fellow from this Haejong Institute. Dr. Woo, thank you for joining us today again.
My pleasure.
Now, as we saw in that last report, Trump and Kim have exchanged numbers and they said they're going to be calling more often. How unprecedented is this between a leader of the US and North Korea exchanging perhaps direct phone numbers, as they've called it? I mean, I don't think we've ever really seen anything like this, especially considering 6 or 7 months ago, they were throwing insults at each other and we seem to be on the brink of war.
Yeah, as we saw last week that the U.S. president first met in the history the North Korean leader, and that is also unprecedented. And the thing that they exchanged the phone number is that they show the trust, and they try to building the trust between two, and they have a mechanism to solve a problem if some issues arise between themselves. So I think that this is a good start for the relations between two countries, and also good for the security measures in Korean Peninsula. Mm-hmm.
When they do talk, they've said they were going to talk maybe perhaps Sunday, but we're not really sure when they will talk yet. What do you think they will talk about? What is on their agenda between the two at the moment?
During the press conference last week, President Trump mentioned that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is going to take measure as soon as he arrives in Pyongyang. So I think that the first question that President Trump might ask to Kim Jong-un would be that what kind of measures he took to move to the direction of the denuclearization of North Korea, because there was a lot of criticism against President Trump because that joint statement did not include any specific measures with regard to the denuclearization process of North Korea. And he defended himself by saying that Kim Jong-un, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, is going to do it, and he actually is going to destroy the missile engine test site. So I think that the first thing that they're going to discuss is about how North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is take the measures to move to the denuclearization of North Korea.
So they're looking to try and make progress on what they agreed in Singapore, I guess. On that front, there's also supposedly working-level talks between North Korea and the US, supposedly happening this week. That's what US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo suggested. What do you think they will talk about when the Mike Pompeo meets with the North Korean counterparts as well? Is it just an extension of what Trump and Kim Jong-un talk about? Or will it be certain, what do you expect them to, what details do you expect them to talk about?
Yeah, joint statement signed by two leaders included the part that the U.S. and North Korea is going to have expedited negotiations for the elements that were agreed by two sides. And I think it will take more time, because now the State Department of the United States lack of personnel in the line of East Asia and the Korean part. So I think the first thing that the United States has to do is to fill those vacant spots. And once they start to have a talk with North Korea, I think the first thing that they have to do is to set up a deadline for the negotiation. As we saw in Iran nuclear deal with the P5+1 countries, they set up a deadline for the negotiation for like 6 months. So I think that to remove any uncertainties about these negotiations between two countries, I think that they have to decide what's the deadline for the negotiation. Then they can talk about what kind of roadmap that they can agree to the denuclearization process of North Korea.
One of the other most controversial results that came out of the Singapore summit was for Trump to announce that he would be ending the joint South Korea-US military drills. Now, President Moon Jae In has since said that they will announce their stance on this matter soon, but they haven't revealed it quite yet. What can we expect, and what do you think what do you think will really happen?
Though many don't agree with the reasons why President Trump wanted to suspend the joint military deals between two allies, which he mentioned that is expensive and provocative. But I think that to show some trust and some good faith to North Korea that it can be suspended for the time while the serious negotiation is continuing between North Korea and the United States. And President Trump also mentioned during the press conference that as long as North Korea is serious in negotiation, he can suspend the military drills. So I think that the Ulchi Freedom Guardian, which is scheduled to held in August, can be suspended for the time being. And I think that two countries are going to discuss what kind of exercises can be further suspended for the sake of the negotiation between the United States and North Korea.
There are reports coming out as well that Seoul is looking to agree on a snapback clause. Now, what that means is that would allow the drills to be restarted immediately should North Korea show any signs that they're not taking steps towards denuclearization. What do you think of this kind of clause?
So President Trump also mentioned during the press conference that the joint military drills is going to get back as scheduled if North Korea is not serious about the negotiation. And the ambassador to Korea nominee, Admiral Harris, also mentioned during the hearings that this is the mechanism to check the seriousness of North Korea in their part to the negotiation. So as soon as we found that North Korea is not serious about their part in negotiation with the United States with regard to its denuclearization, I think that United States and South Korea already, I think, agree to have the joint military drills back as it's scheduled.
So do you think the snapback clause will be actually written in writing? Because once it's written in writing, it almost kind of shows that there's a lack of trust from South Korea and the US that the North Korea will carry out denuclearization. Wouldn't that send the wrong message to North Korea and Pyongyang?
I don't think that we need to write it down and make it as a kind of law-like clause. But the thing important for this is that we have to send a message to North Korea that you have to be serious about the negotiation because we are doing this in good faith. So you have to return in good faith. So I think that United States and South Korea agreed to suspend the joint military drills as long as North Korea is serious in negotiation. So automatically, if we found that North Korea is not serious, then we can have the joint militaries back again.
Now, one of the things that was happening today was the two Koreas held talks over the sporting ventures that they're going to have. Next, on Friday, they're also going to meet to talk about the separated family reunions. And there's a whole host of other meetings that are happening this week and next, it seems. It seems that as long as the North Korea-US relationship stays friendly and stays good, we can probably predict that these South Korean, inter-Korean ventures will go smoothly as well. Do you agree with that?
Yes, but there are certain areas that can be allowed under the sanction regime, but there are still many areas that cannot be allowed under the international sanction regime. So like sporting event and family reunion can be done even under the international sanction imposed on North Korea. But the economic cooperation projects, including Kaesong Industrial Complex or Kumgang Mountain tourism, that has been exempted if South Korean government wants to proceed to that, because international sanctions on North Korea prohibits South Korean government or any entities from doing that kind of project with North Korea. So I think we have to distinguish the project that are allowed under the international sanctions, and that's not allowed under the international sanctions. But as long as North Korea is serious in negotiation with the United States about denuclearization, I think that many projects can proceed by having some waivers from the international community on sanctions.
It seems the Moon administration wants to have these kind of projects happen quickly and proceed quickly. But for North Korea, do you think there's a chance that they might want to drag their feet a little with these kind of ventures, that they want to not take it quite as fast as the Moon administration wants it? So in the future, they can go back if they want to.
If North Korea is rational and if they want to achieve economic development, there is no way that they can achieve with sanctions intact, because all sanctions will remain intact unless North Korea shows some progress in denuclearization, and President Trump and Secretary Mike Pompeo and also South Korean government confirmed that the sanctions will remain until the North Korea is denuclearized. So I think that the best process for the North Korea is to move to the denuclearization very quickly. That's the way that international community can lift the sanctions against North Korea.
But with these kind of inter-Korean ventures that are separate from the denuclearization, would you say, is this just a way to show that they're willing to play ball with South Korea and the international community, do you think?
But there, as I told you, that there's a limitations that North Korean government can achieve economic benefits under the sanctions. So they can achieve some small economic benefits by dragging the denuclearization process, because nothing really can happen with the international sanctions on North Korea, because they cannot use the international financial system, they cannot get the bulk cash. So I think that if North Korea really want to achieve economic development, the best way for them to do is move to the denuclearization, and then international community is going to lift the sanctions against them.
President Moon will be going to Russia this week. And of course, with the Russian officials, he'll be talking about the North Korea and everything that's happening right now. How do you see the relationship between South Korea and Russia now after the North Korea-US summit? What do they think the two sides will want from each other now?
From Russia's perspective, that there are two main goals that they want to achieve when President Putin meet President Moon Jae In. First one is that they want to exert their influence on Korean Peninsula in strategic terms. And second, they want South Korea to be the economic partner, especially in Far Eastern area of the Russia. And for South Korean part, that Moon Jae In government proposed the Northern Economic Cooperation Plan, which requires Russia's strong cooperation with South Korea. And there was a hurdle for that, which is North Korean issues. So if North Korea's denuclearization process can move smooth, then it both benefits Russia and South Korea, because now they can overcome that hurdle which impedes both countries to move to the economic cooperation process. So I think that for that, Russia and South Korea has a shared interest in overcoming the North Korean issues. So I think there are a lot of areas that they can cooperate.
And finally, just before we go, let's talk about China as well, because they're obviously a major player here. North Korea seems to be continuing to court China's support. The front page of the regime's state newspaper, its main mouthpiece really, Rodong Sinmun, over the weekend showed Pyongyang had sent a special birthday message to President Xi Jinping and a flower basket as well. Does this show how importantly the relationship that North Korea finds China with in this situation?
I think that the real negotiation between the United States and North Korea about denuclearization of North Korea is going to start very soon. And for that, North Korea needs its strong ally. Because for the denuclearization process and the sanctions remain intact, North Korea's negotiation position is weaker than the United States. So I think that North Korea needs China ever than before. So that's why North Korea sends this diplomatic message to China to strengthen their relations, because North Korea needs China as their ally when it comes to the negotiations with the United States.
And finally, do you feel last week's summit was a win for China in this situation, in the geopolitical situation here in East Asia?
It's too early to tell. We have to see how the negotiation between the United States and North Korea is going. So by North Korea, by that negotiation, we can retrospectively assess the success or failure of the summit last week in Singapore.
Well, thank you for your time, Dr. Wu. It's always great to have you with us here today.
Thank you.
That concludes our show for today. Do tune in to Arirang News again throughout the day for more of the latest news updates. Thank you for watching and hope you do join us again next time. Goodbye.